Okay, so let's take more of a concrete approach to looking at AT assessments and how we gather information. So assessments generally include identification of strengths and weaknesses, determination of program eligibility, so whether a student would, say, qualify for special education services in which category, if it's a categorical system in the school district. Documenting progress, so how well the student's doing, related to some criteria. Selecting interventions, and finally conducting research. Assessments must have both reliability and validity. So to measure reliability, we want to make sure that if we apply the same test over and over again, it really yields the same results over time if it's gathering the same. So if I applied an IQ test on you today and then I apply the same IQ test on you tomorrow, you shouldn't have become any more intelligent or less intelligent in that 24-hour period. Validity is how well the assessment measures what it's supposed to measure. So if I'm applying a test to measure IQ, it shouldn't measure personality or something like that. There are three concepts relevant to assistive technology assessments. They must be ecological, practical, and they should be ongoing. So ecological means that the behavior is dependent on the individual interactions and the environment. So it interacts. And therefore all assessments need to consider the various contexts where the device will be used and with whom the individual will interact. Different teachers, school setting, home setting for homework, etc. So there's this idea of interaction, right? That's why it's really important, and I touched on this in part one, that the teacher is involved, that the general ed teachers are involved in the process if you're dealing with an inclusion setting. One, the teacher has important information on the demands that are specific to his classroom, his or her classroom. So what personal expectations they have of the student, they're going to be unique by teacher. So it's really important that you tap into those, because otherwise, if we go back to the SET framework that we talked about, you'll never really know the idea of tasks that need to be performed and how often those tasks are performed. The more input also from the stakeholders, including teachers, will lead to the probability that the device is being used and will be used. So it's important to have the teacher buy into training and allowing the student to function using the device in their classroom. We can collect data from teachers in a couple of ways. We can use rating scales. So if we have limited time, we can push paper out for them to fill out. And we can also use informal or formal interviews. So here's a rating scale. And this is, again, this is the contextual matching inventory, the functional evaluation of assistive technology. So this one measures, again, the tasks. So you see in part A, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Those would be the individual teachers for the student, okay? And the columns below, they line up with the teacher. So if I was number 1 there, I put Ellis, and then I'd only fill out column 1 for setting, okay? Because that's the setting-specific demands we were talking about. So directions, based on the interviews with people in up to 6 different settings, rate the frequency with which each task is required in each classroom, daily, weekly, monthly, or even less frequently. Write any if not required. So listen to lectures. In column 1, I put in D for daily. Listen to directions and instructions, D for daily. Listen to works with peers and coworkers. Probably weekly, W, and we go through filling out and looking at that. And then, of course, we can create a composite of that in like an Excel spreadsheet, giving values to daily, weekly, and monthly. And then we have a big picture for the frequency for each category of task that the student needs to be involved in within the classroom environment. So assessments need to be practical as well. So the idea is we need to put the device into use in the environment that it's going to be used in an ongoing basis. That way we can seek information and participation from specialists, from teachers, in the classroom, and we can allow the user to gain experience using the device in the natural environment and receive training on the device simultaneously, as well as allowing training on the device to be conducted with various people, teachers, coworkers, supervisors, depending on whether it's a school environment or a work environment. So we can also look at the individual technology evaluation scale for how well the technology is actually meeting the needs of the student. So in part A, the directions are: circle the number that best corresponds to level matching for the specific area. If the statement is not appropriate, just circle NA. So effectiveness of the technology enhancing accuracy and quality of the student's work in class, right? And then we fill out this Likert type scale. So degree to which the individual sustained attention using the technology, etc. So this is how we're seeing whether it's working in the environment, so practical in nature, and the fact that it's going to be ongoing. We'll probably apply this assessment several times over the course of the adoption of it. There are many possible members of AT assessment team. We've already talked about that from part 1. So we also have to talk about the fact that it needs to be ongoing, right? So for AT to be effective, it must be matched to the individual, meshed with other devices and services and the individual. So we need to marry those together and evaluated consistently to make sure the adaptation is benefiting to the level hypothesized. So that's the idea of what your textbook talks about. If you can secure the device for a trial period by borrowing from somebody or some entity, it's probably better to do that before buying it to test the waters, because even though we've accounted for all the characteristics of the student, the environment, and the tasks that need to be performed, it doesn't always mean that we're going to hit the target dead on. So it's always good if we have the opportunity to try out the equipment at no cost, or at least lease it at low cost for a month. It's a good way to test the waters. So we can look at a framework for determining the most appropriate and potentially effective device. Again, we look at tasks, the specific tasks, functions to be performed, reading, writing, remembering, and the requisite skills associated with those tasks. We look at the individual's specific strengths, weaknesses, special abilities, prior experience and knowledge and interest. So that's how well they're going to adapt to the technology and whether it's appropriate for them at all. Then we look at the device, so the specific device, the reliability, the operational ease, the technical support, cost, etc. And then finally the context, the specific context of interaction across settings such as school, home, work, and over such a time as a semester or a lifetime. And that just kind of recaps what we've talked about. So again, we've got a really small target bullseye at the center, and we have a lot of characteristics that we need to account for in assessment. Okay, so how well the performance of the device is, how cost effective it is, whether we have insurance that pays for it, or whether we have to go to private funding. The availability of the device. In North America, we're kind of blessed that we have a lot of opportunities. In other countries, they don't have the availability and selection that we have. The appearance, it might be a bright orange color, and the student might not want to, scream out, "I have a disability, so I don't want to use this." Comfort level, if it's something fatiguing over time, so for instance, like voice synthesis that speaks back in a automated voice, that might be very fatiguing over time if you have to listen to your entire textbook in that format. And then we have a lot of subcomponents within each of those. There are some cultural stigmas of people of different cultures. They don't like to use certain types of devices because they don't want to stick out as well. There are attitudinal issues. People might not be ready for a device. They might not be ready to sit down in a wheelchair if they've lost mobility right away. Economic, again, sometimes it might be out of pocket if we want a higher end, high-tech device when the school's only willing to pay for a low-tech device. Legislative politics, it's kind of the discrepancy we talk about with medical prosthesis and things like cochlear implants not being covered under school districts, but we can try to assimilate those under insurance. Then there are even further subcomponents, finite needs, so needs, capabilities, and preferences. Those, again, highly based on the individual and their lifestyles. Prior support and use, so whether they've used a device before and they can kind of piggyback on that, that learning base that they already have. Motivation and readiness, are they ready to accept the device, to use it in school? Have they just been diagnosed and they're not accepting of their disability? Expectations and moods, are their expectations higher than what the device is going to achieve for them? Lifestyles, is it congruent with the lifestyle that they want to keep? So for instance, I'm a runner. If I lost a leg, I would still want to be able to run. So that would be requiring me to have a very different prosthetic than just a regular prosthetic for walking. And then once you account for all of these, hopefully we can kind of hit the bullseye.